Hello, we'll call to order the March 20th, 2024 regular meeting of the APCHA Board of Directors. First item on the agenda is roll call. Cindy, please.
Kelly? And is Kelly online? Why don't we not see everybody, buddy? Hopefully you said yes. Here? Is there a reason why we can't?
Bear with just a minute. We think we need to get the audio in the room.
I swear.
Here's Peter.
Kelly, can you hear us?
Peter's talking and I can't hear him.
Can you hear us, Kelly? And there's the person on the cell phone talking.
Yeah. Every week we come in, it's something different.
Aspen.
Hey, boss.
Should I pause?
No, just keep it.
Whoever's this hybrid meetings.
We
are
cannot
not
hear
a
them.
Problem. Haven't tried to do a hybrid meeting. Right?
It's the people on Zoom that you guys can't hear.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Previously it was same assistant, same assistant.
Yeah, we had some changes recently. Anyone online, if you can.
Can someone online just give us a mic check?
Kelly or Peter, would you talk to us?
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. Gotcha.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Present.
Okay, Cindy.
Okay,
So Kelly's
So-
here.
Kelly, Peter?
Here.
Peter,
Present. Yes.
thank you. John?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Carson?
Here. And then we have John Ward as well.
But he's not here. Oh, is he online?
Yes, he is.
Oh, and John Ward?
On the phone.
Thank you, John.
On the phone.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, we'll move next. Any agenda amendments? Hearing none, we'll go to public comment. Is there anyone online who would like to make a public comment? If so, just go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay. No, we'll close public comment. No one in the room, and move to Board of Directors comments. We'll start online with Kelly.
None today, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Peter?
None, thank you.
John Ward?
Yeah, I apologize for not being in person. Got caught on the bridge or traffic and turned around and came back. But no comment.
Thank you. John Doyle?
No comment tonight, thanks.
Ward?
I follow suit.
All right, well, let's just make it unanimous. No comments for me. We'll move to Executive Director's comments. Matthew?
Cybertruck, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
That's
I
more
saw
interesting than me.
Cybertruck.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. Matthew Gillen, Executive Director. I just wanted to highlight two things. The reserve study, which APCHA is paying for, we are in contact with many HOAs, and I believe there's 20 have signed up.
About 20.
20 have signed up. We're putting an ad in the papers starting next week. We've mentioned on social media, and I'm getting the APCHA newsletter out ahead of schedule, and that'll be the main focus of that. So, and they have until the end of April to sign up. So they have five or 6 weeks.
Have
you
had shouldn't be locked.
anybody that inquired and chose not to sign up? Not at this point, right?
That's actually, I thought it was on mute. Sorry, that was my fault. So far, everyone that has inquired has signed up. We
Great.
only have one HOA that is hesitant. Yeah.
And then the other thing, while Liz is still here, I also wanted to flag that we still have money in the Essential Repairs Grant Program, and we will be flagging that for everybody. I think we've allocated about 60% of it. Is that right? Yeah. And we're still publicizing that, and we certainly don't want to go over, so we're making sure we get the right amount of money for that, but we still have money, we still have availability for that. And I will be taking 2 weeks, I'll be taking the meeting remotely. I'll be helping my in-laws move out of their house of 50 years, which is very exciting. So I'll be remote for that one. And that's all I have. Thank you. Cindy?
Just trying to think. Again, just remember to sign up for notifications through our website. We do have some, I believe, new ownership or different ownership units coming up for sale on Friday. And we have 2 that are still in their first week. So we have a single-family home, and then we have a 1-bedroom at Lone Pine. Of course, if you needed to update your packet or you had a new packet, the deadline was today at 4. So, but you can, if you have everything updated, just a reminder that you have 1 more week to actually place a bid. And another reminder for everybody is that we are requiring 2023 W-2s, 1099s, end of year, last year profit and loss statement if you're self-employed, just to remind you of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And would just like to note Allison is in person. And Allison, did you have any comments? No. Okay. All right. We'll move to the consent calendar. Just one item, minutes of the March 6th regular meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Got a motion to approve from Kelly,
I'll second.
second from Ward. Any discussion or changes?
There's a Bektesh misspelling that I'm not offended by, but if that's important, it has only E's in it.
All right. Where
Which
is
one?
that?
Board of Directors comments.
Only E's.
Only E's.
Got it.
And no C's, even though there's one in the first name. So there's lots of rules. I'm sorry.
I will fix that.
Okay. So we have a motion amended with just the spelling of Allison's name. And it's a roll call vote.
Okay. John Ward,
Yeah.
Kelly,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Ward, Howenstein,
Yes.
and Allison.
Yes.
All right. We'll move to the discussion on affordability.
Can you allow me to share my screen? This chair feels really low.
Good afternoon, APCHA Board. Diane Foster, City of Aspen Assistant City Manager.
and Liz Axberg, Housing Policy Analyst for the City of Aspen.
And Liz is going to share her screen. And with that, let me just say that I forgot and we forgot that sometimes people are online. So John and Kelly, we've got a workaround we're going to get you out of your chairs today. But it'll only be for a short period of time, and there won't be any speaking while you're out of your chair. And we're going to have you text Liz, but she'll give you some instructions on that when we get to that part of the agenda. So we've heard from the APCHA board that you all wanted to talk about affordability. And as you all know, there's also been a conversation that Ward led with the Aspen City Council, and that Kelly led. She led an APCHA update with the BOCC. And there was a joint council meeting where this was a topic where what do you want to talk about with APCHA was a topic? Ward, is that a fair summarization of?
Yeah, I think what we were looking for is consensus from both boards to bring forward the representatives to fully represent their respective boards.
Thank you. And to that end, the Aspen City Council members met with staff and asked if they could go and do quarterly updates for the board to be more extensive than in the past and actually have a city council discussion on a quarterly basis. And I believe the county's going to be doing that as well. With today's presentation, first and foremost, the purpose of today, this will be the easiest item you will have in a long time. Because all we need to do is come up with a prioritized list of the things you want to talk about. What we don't need to do is we won't need to have a deep dive into it, although you will have the opportunity to discuss, okay, if you really want to talk about this one thing and it has a certain name, you'll have a chance to explain what that means and answer questions and those types of things. But really what we want to do is come out with a prioritized list of what you want to talk about first. Of course, if you've got a long list, those are all things that you can tackle. It's hey, what is most important to the most number of board members? So with that, why are Liz and I here? Ms. Cindy and Ms. Bethany are especially busy right now with Maddie out with a new baby. And so we offered to just come and facilitate this session. Some version of us, it may be APCHA staff, will be back on May 15th for the first of these discussions. And then Matthew and Cindy and Bethany will get these agendized for you in the coming months. So let's go ahead and jump to, we put a definition in the packet of what affordability was. And I will not read to you because I know you can. But it's basically the first cost and then the ongoing cost. And if it's somebody's rent, that might include what's your down payment, what's your security deposits, etc. Is this an okay definition to work with? It's really does that work for you when it comes to talking about what is affordability relative to relative to housing? And Carson, are you okay if I facilitate this? Okay, great.
Is that supplemental to just kind of like the standard actual numerical of affordability of the 30% standing?
It is, and it's actually, and it's trying to get to a little bit higher level because that 30%, I don't know what the derivation of that was, and I think that is it varies based on, Liz and I were looking at some data this week as far as the cost of living indexes, right? And so if your cost of living index outside of housing is a lot greater in an area, then that 30% might be a burden. And I would say in this community, I don't know many people who it's 30%. That's just I think that's a reality.
Quickly, Kelly?
Yeah, thank you. And I was just going to comment similarly. This sort of gets at the goal, I think, of affordability, whereas when I think of a cost burden household, that sort of gets at how do we measure affordability. Mm-hmm. So I'm okay with this for a working working definitions, you know, guiding us towards what we want to achieve, is how I think of it.
Yeah, I think this ties into the 30% being above that as being housing burdened. But so it's money left over for everything else. And anything above 30% is generally considered to be too much to be paying for your housing.
I mean, just essentials. I mean, isn't that food, transportation, and healthcare?
It is. I think it's a great way to frame it. What are kind of the basic necessities? So we'll use it as a working example, as a working definition, and if you all want to make a change to it in the future, we can. One of the purposes of today is to start for you all to get a common understanding of what is it when the APCHA board is talking about affordability, what are those things that you really, like what does that mean first and foremost, and then secondly, what are the things that matter most for you all from a policy perspective? And you're talking about policy, or am I talking about policy?
Yeah, I can talk about
Okay, great. And then I think you've got one more slide on this. So this was just an example of, you know, Carson had a conversation with me about some of the things from a board chair perspective he was thinking about. So some of these come from him, some of these come from the city council and BOCC discussions. Here are some of the areas you might want to focus on. So these are examples of policy areas that fall under that greater umbrella of affordability. And Liz, please add color wherever.
Yeah, and we'll bring this slide back up again once we start brainstorming topics, just so you have, get some ideas. So now we're going to go into the plan for today. And as Diane,
real
go
quick,
ahead.
Peter.
Yeah, I don't want to derail the conversation, but just for background, what is the genesis of the concern about affordability and how is it showing up? Like, are we hearing from owners or renters or people saying, what pains are we hearing about and how are they being quantified?
That's a great question, Peter, and I'm glad you asked it at this stage. We know that there are people in APCHA housing that are paying more than 30% rent. In fact, I would venture to guess there are a lot of people. We haven't gone and looked at the database and done the full analysis, but Liz and I were doing some work last year when the renters in Centennial apartments, when their rents, because of the lawsuit under which their rents were governed, their rents could increase and did increase for some people probably a 40 or 50%. No, some were greater than 50% increase. When we were looking at the analysis on that, we were seeing people with 60% of their income was going to rent. And that was before the rental increase. So it's a known problem. Also, Peter, the second genesis of that is that the APCHA board over the past, I would say, 3 to 4 years, this topic comes up a lot. And it comes up sometimes as specifically an affordability discussion. And sometimes, as you see in the packet, there's a memo from Bethany from last year. Sometimes it comes up in terms of we want to talk about this specific thing and it falls under the topic of affordability.
And I would just add to that there's, I mean, even within some categories, you can have people who are at 60%, right, at the low end of the category, and then you could have people at the high end of the category who are, it could be 15 or 20%, right? And so I think it's just trying to kind of, maybe the goal, just trying to standardize that a little bit more.
Right, definitely. Okay. Any other questions, comments before we go into the outline for today's discussion? Okay. So we're going to break this up into 2 parts. So first, we're going to do some brainstorming. And as Diane said earlier, we're pivoting a little bit because we forgot about hybrid meetings. And so in the memo, we mentioned, we asked board members to come with 2 policy areas or topics that you would like to further discuss. And we are going to have a little time if you need to think about it as well. And then after that, we'll have a compiled list of all these ideas that we're going to categorize. And we'll say, we have, from this list that you've all compiled, we have 6 common themes, 5 common themes of affordability that are popping up. And then we'll prioritize from there to decide what we want to talk about first. And that will come back in the May 13th board meeting. We'll do a deeper dive into that topic. And so by the end of this, we'll have this prioritized list of affordability policy discussions. So, and 3 things I want to bring up before we go into brainstorming as well. So first is policy versus administrative. So policy is the what and administrative is the how. So today we want to make sure ideas and discussions are focused on the policy side so we can address the administrative side from there. Second is high level ideas. As Diane said earlier, we want to keep it high level so that way when we come back to this discussion, we can prepare a deeper dive into that topic. And today is just generating ideas and deciding what to talk about first. And then third is keeping in mind that some of these might be addressed in the rental rate study if APCHA also participates in that. And that's supposed to happen starting this summer too. So some of these are questions that might get addressed by that as well. So from there, we'll get started with brainstorming. And so the plan for people that are in person is that you're each going to get 2 Post-it notes. And you're going to write 1 idea per Post-it note of the policy discussion that you want to talk about. And we'll put it up on a flip chart. For those that are online, if I'm going to provide my work cell and you can text me your ideas and just give me your name as well. So is there a chat that I could type my... No, I don't think so. I could just say it out loud then. I want to make sure that's okay with you all to just text me your ideas, since we forgot about that.
He's online.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I could give you all my number now, so that way we are ready. Is everyone online ready if I give you my phone number to text me your Post-it note ideas?
Ready.
Okay, great. So it's 970-319-8861. Hope everyone got that. Let me know if you didn't, and I can just say it again. Okay. And so I'm going to give out 2 Post-it notes, otherwise to everyone in person, and a Sharpie marker. And so 1 idea per Post-it note, an affordability policy topic that you would like the APCHA board to discuss further. Let me grab those.
And while Liz is doing that, as a reminder, at the end of this, right, so you all, I'm sure, have more than 2 topics that you want to talk about. These are the 2 most important. There'll be an opportunity for you to submit those, and we'll feed that back to the APCHA board.
I don't really get to walk around in here that often.
That's kind of a sledgehammer approach with that marker. I have a pen.
Well, we don't want to get
Yes.
Oh.
We don't want you to be able to write too much.
Number 1. Number 2.
Yeah, keep in mind it's 1 idea per Post-it note. What is the headline of that idea as well? And then if we have questions about ideas that people bring up, then we can address them as we go through them on the flip chart.
So for the folks online, Liz just said, remember, these are headlines. So you want to think about, like, are you writing somewhere between 1 and 5 or 6 words at most? That'll make it easier to text as well. Thanks.
First time we've tried this here, so we'll see how it goes. Okay. We didn't ask for clarity. Yeah, we could. I could also, as we read them, just say,
Yep.
hey, can we talk more about this?
Cool.
We get to stand up too.
Yeah, of course. That's all part of it. Isn't this fun?
Handwriting's already bad, and then they get a fat marker, and it's really bad.
Well, if it all blends together, they don't know it.
Yeah.
And once I think everyone's sent or put up 2, then we'll move to the next part.
You can tell me.
Oh, sure, if we. Yep, I got the. And then.
Ooh, that word is showing up a lot. There's Austin.
And when we start grouping, I'll try to talk close to the mic, but.
This is, there's some different. Yeah. So, like parity or quality, equity, these are all.
So, I know everyone in the room has put up 2. Has everyone online sent me 2, or are people still thinking? I think I've got.
We can continue to think after we send you two.
Yeah, that's true.
Can we do a quick inventory?
I think
Did you get
just
one
one
person
person.
from everybody?
Oh, we got one more. All right, bear with us. Here. Oh, okay. Then we're all set. Okay, so you see Diane already started grouping these, but we're gonna check with you all to make sure that these are correctly grouped, and then get your input and what you would call these categories. So let's see
Are you
what we
able
got here.
Do you,
And the camera's faced the right way. You're holding like a microphone.
Yeah, exactly.
And hopefully that we can hear okay with that. And Diane, you can help me since I know you already sort of looked at these. But I'll read through all the Post-its so you know the ideas that everyone put down. And then we can decide, is this correctly grouped or do you think it's its own category? And once we have a few items in one category, we can decide together what you would call that category so that we have a compiled list of topics that we can prioritize from. So,
and just a quick check, folks online, can you hear Liz?
Yes, thank
great.
you.
Sounds
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
Perfect. Okay, and I'll move this a little closer too. Sweet. So first we have continued compliance. I am curious whoever wrote this if they want to talk a little bit about how that relates to affordability. Yeah.
I just threw that out there because we needed 2, and the first
Yeah.
one was obviously the most important one.
Yeah,
Just-
definitely. Well, we keep it up. Great. So then we have distribution of unit category assignments across inventory. And in that one, we also have category brackets, and if they should be the same, rental versus owner. And we also have percent of income we want to use. So those three are grouped together. And I think that kind of falls into category distribution or brackets. What do you all think? How would you describe that category?
I think that's fine. My one distinction, I think, is what those brackets are, and then how we decide the percentage of each bracket, that we want.
Yeah.
So is it an even spread, or do we bulk out Cat 3 or whatever?
So do you think it would be correct to say, like, those are two different sub-bullets beneath the category brackets headline? Okay, so you could say,
Excuse me, Allison, could I ask, just for clarification on that, are you talking about the categories of the existing inventory? That, is it distribution proper? Is that the?
So if we decide certain steps for what category 1 through 5 are, if there should be 5 categories, what are the increments, and they're distributed in such a way that each one of those categories pretty much takes care of 20% of our population, then there should be 20% of each category. If we do it as it is now, where very little people are making maybe Cat 1 or Cat 6, 5 RO, most people are Cat 3, then we need more inventory in Cat 3 to appease that. So what we determine as what the brackets are is going to determine the spread.
So it would be by population and not by demand?
I think without any getting into the specifics, like I think the broad term could be brackets, but I just see two different part of bracket assignments in those two comments.
and actually to check with that, now I think I understand more. So you're saying category distribution across the units versus categories as in how we're qualifying people for units and what the brackets we're using within there.
Yep. The income limits to each category would be a bracket, but then how many of each bracket we need throughout the industry, like I think dark blue post-it is different from light blue post-it.
So do you think that should be two different categories? Unit distribution versus category distribution? Because I'm curious what you all think.
I just think it's two stages of talking about brackets.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're different.
Okay, then
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. How do other people feel
Can I
about that?
jump in on this?
Yep.
Thanks. No, Liz, you'll see in my text here, I said that maybe an additional item that wasn't on the list is related to what Allison is explaining. Because, you know, when I look back at kind of the definition, we were talking about, that definition to me is like for a household. I do think there is a role for this body to have a discussion about like affordability for whom. You know, when we talk about like the broader population, I think we also need to spend some time kind of figuring out, you know, our goals and kind of policy area related to that. Because I'm not sure, like, if we end up with all kind of RO or Category 5, you know, households for some reason based on policy decisions we make, I'm not sure we would consider that a success, even if that's affordable for all those households, right? So I do want to sort of echo. I think there's two parts to this conversation: kind of a household-based and then a population-based conversation. And I think everything on the list, when I read it, was more relative to sort of the household-based items. So I think we should add kind of what Allison had explained here related to population. But I don't think it was on our initial list.
Okay. Maybe I can add another post-it that says affordability for whom, and we can add that into this category distribution category that's separate from category brackets. Does that sound okay?
Also, you do have an equality and equity on a number of the Post-it notes, so that will be a discussion for you, for the board, in a couple minutes. Thanks.
So right now I'm just adding a category unit distribution category. I'm saying category so many times. Okay. And then if that works for everyone, we can keep going to the next post-it. Okay. So we have repair or maintenance facilitation. Seems like that's the only one that addresses that, so maybe we just have a category about maintenance. And if anyone who wrote that wants to talk
I
about
think
it.
that was mine, and it was, yeah, it's more about how do we make that affordable so you're not paying Red Mountain prices to a contractor to fix your roof,
Yeah.
fix your windows, right?
Yeah, maintenance affordability. All right, we'll keep going. So we have one that says AMI. Is AMI the best game?
Gauge.
Gate. Sorry, I can't read. Gauge. That makes sense. Sorry, the big markers. For example, the category mix. This seems like it could maybe go into category brackets. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we look at different HUD and DOLA, different category, what AMIs are, and I think in the past it's been questioned if an AMI is right or earned income, or what do we use as a gauge to base that distribution of the different categories on? Yeah, because it's always been, I think, AMI.
Okay.
I think it's the category brackets because you're talking about what percentage of income is appropriate and then what index do you measure that against?
So you think that does fall underneath category brackets
Yeah,
versus
I think
having
they're-
a category
I think
about
they're
index?
related.
Okay.
And so one of the ways to think about it, though, to decide if it should go in that bucket or should it be its own, is you're going to have an in-depth discussion about it. The more stuff you put in the bucket, the less focused conversation you're going to have. So, right, this is a fundamental question about should you be using AMI or should you be using earned income or just straight income, or looking at job distribution in the valley and saying we want to account for how jobs distribute, and we might have this bracket of jobs. We've got a lot of these, so it's going to be a narrow bracket. That's what you're talking about, Ward?
Yeah, going to what the job generation is or what the job salaries are is, I mean, that's a different way of looking at it. I think we had a housing study that that is going to take that into consideration. So that would be some measuring stick.
It is, and so you're asking, should we look at the basic measuring, the underlying measuring? Should we tackle that, which is probably something you'd want to tackle before? Are you going to change how categories work?
Yeah, I think I think it fits in with what Allison is saying too. Is that what's the distribution?
I feel fine with those being in the same bucket for now. It does, because it feels so intertwined that if we say we're not going to talk about categories while we talk about our measuring stick, or vice versa, I think we'll lose part of the conversation. I appreciate what you're saying, and I think there's definitely an order of operations there. It is hard for me to start talking about measuring sticks and AMI, or what indexes to measure when we're using a standard that is philosophical for what affordability is. Back to the very first slide, because those are not going to match, like, as Kelly's saying, it, 2 income household with 3 kids, then, and you're also taking into consideration healthcare costs or food. That's very different from saying the healthcare costs or food. Since our standard now that we've agreed upon is so much broader than just your earnings, I'm wondering how we will play out choosing an index to extrapolate that.
This goes to that question: does the APCHA board want to reconsider using AMI as a fundamental standard? And I do think if that's an important topic, you should separate it, because it is a giant topic.
Is that something that would be addressed in the study?
we've not asked them to look at something other than AMI, to use a
Yeah.
different standard. We are asking them elements, so we are asking them about what are the jobs in the valley and what do they pay, and things like that, but we haven't asked them specifically, is AMI the right tool to use to look at affordability?
But so they will be looking at the expenses that then we could sort of compare to AMI, and then I guess what I'm saying is I think if we're going to have that discussion, I feel like that discussion might be more impactful if we had the results of the study.
Yes, and
So then
what
maybe it does make sense to break them out.
I think it will.
When we've had that discussion since I've been on the board,
Right.
is AMI the right index?
Yeah, there was also a memo in the packet specifically about that topic too.
Kelly?
Thanks. I do think we need to noodle on this a bit. I would be very hesitant to not track AMI across the inventory, simply because it's such a metric that's relied on, funding that we as city and county need to go after and kind of demonstrate what we've already done in the community at times. But whether that is how we define rental rates or something, I think is a bigger discussion. And I would just sort of flag, one of the things that I think would be useful to share with this board was information that came out of the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition that looked at like wage-based income across the region, and also the MIT living wage metrics for our area as well. That, it's another way to think about what's affordable.
I think it would be useful to find out what other housing authorities are using, if AMI is universal across the board, or if there are other ones that we considered, so that we at least know that if we come back to the fact that to the decision that we're going to continue to use AMI, that we have some basis of comparison on that.
And for housing agencies that work in the valley, as well as federal, they are all AMI based. And we're not saying that the current distribution of AMIs is correct. It's do you want to go to that fundamental underlying question of, are we going to get rid of AMI? And Kelly identified some implications, is that state and federal funding actually is tied to it as well. What I'm trying to avoid is that putting too much in that discussion of looking at categories, We could spend quite literally months and a lot of staff time doing research on, do you want to look at something other than AMI? We can. Doesn't mean we can't do
To me,
it.
it feels like we're trying to reinvent the wheel on something that I don't think we're really equipped to do. I mean, you have the data. It's been, I wouldn't touch it. I'd talk more about rent rates and housing prices.
I also don't need to have the AMI discussion, but if we have it, I think it should happen before the category bracket discussion. And it sounds like the AMI should happen after survey, so we're just knowing this is a fall conversation,
But the next step we're going to do here is prioritize, so you can identify when you're voting on where we should talk first and be like, we're not ready for that yet, or this is more pressing to talk about too first.
Kelly, did you have something?
No, sorry, I'll lower my hand.
So would everyone be okay if I do write AMI metric as a category then?
Yeah, if we're going to prioritize them in the end, then
Yeah.
it can be
We're not
eliminated
ready
in
to
the
talk
first
about it.
round.
Yeah.
It is not exactly a priority, just I think it's an order of operations. Like, why would we talk about brackets if we didn't even know what we were using to measure,
Peter?
Yes, just trying to get the big picture again. when we're talking about AMI and these categories, it would be helpful for me to understand who is being most impacted or this relates to. My big picture thinking is if we have 3,200 units and 1,600 roughly, I think, in ownership, 1,400, so my number's a little bit off, but 1,400 in rental, and 200 of those 1,400 in rental are APCHA managed. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the comment about Centennial where the rents went up, and that created an affordability issue for those renters. That was specific to APCHA rental units that are owned by the private sector. So if you took that 1,400 total rental units, 200 of those are managed by APCHA, so we're not going to run into that problem there. It really has to do with the other 1,200, and some of those 1,200 are managed or owned by businesses. So I'd love to learn kind of in this funnel who is being most impacted by the categories and paying a higher percentage of their total income towards housing within the whole pie of APCHA, the housing units. And I understand the categories also translate to applying for ownership and making that fair so that when an owner does win a unit, they're put in a situation where they can afford that unit. But the topic I'd like to discuss, just to jump into it, is that the 1,600 people in ownership units have a different reality than the people in rental units as far as affordability, because their affordability is only taken into consideration when they purchase the unit. So if we have some people in those 1,200 rental units that are paying, a lot more than 30% of their income, there's a lot of people in ownership units that are not paying 30% of their income towards housing. So how do we just address the disparity within the system, affordability?
I think that's one of our next categories.
Okay.
Okay. Why don't we just do that one next then? Because we had a few post-it notes that bring up equity, which I think you were just talking about, Peter. So we have parity or equality of affordability across the whole program, rental and ownership. We have equity, rental at percent of income, and attempt percent of income equity. Do you all think those are three properly grouped then, or did anyone mean something different by what they wrote? Okay, and how would you?
Can
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
jump in? Sorry.
Yeah.
Just raised my hand, but going back to this, like there are different categories of people within APCHA housing that are impacted differently on affordability, and kind of understanding those different groups, I think, would be helpful.
Sorry, Peter, can you say that again?
Well, it seems like there are different cohorts within APCHA housing that are impacted by categories and affordability differently, whether they're in rental or ownership or in seasonal housing, or they have families, whatever it may be. I think it's hard to look at this as just one big picture, how people are impacted in terms of affordability.
Peter, I think that there's a fundamental issue here, and that is point of time at the time of purchase of a for sale unit versus having to requalify every couple of years for rentals. So you're right. Somebody buys a unit 20 years later, they're in a lot different financial situation, but they're locked in on what their mortgage payments are and what, for the most part, their expenses are. And we have no control over changing what percentage you're paying. So it occurs to me that we should be looking at this affordability in the rental, as the rental categories and the as a rental side, and maybe as the I'm not sure how we approach the for sale side, but that's just one point in time.
Yeah, I totally get that. So my math says we're talking about a third of the overall inventory that is impacted by this affordability question. The people in rental housing that are not in APCHA or city-owned rental housing. That's 30, I don't know the exact percent, it's roughly a third of the overall inventory. So I think we're talking about affordability in that specific group of renters that are requalifying every 2 years or however it is. It's a different focus, or in my opinion, and I would love to focus on that cohort. I just don't know that the affordability discussion is the same across the whole spectrum of APCHA housing.
So I wonder if we could have a specific category on renters, or, I think there's a couple different comments up there of let's look at rental versus owner. Should there be two different category brackets? Do they have equity? What Ward is speaking about of having to re-up. I think that's my biggest thing coming into this discussion is how different it is for the rentals and the ownership. I absolutely think we have to talk about the ownership being affordable as well. I don't think we ignore that part of the conversation, but I wonder if as a subcategory of our equity talk, we say like renter experience, or if that's its own thing.
Yeah, or maybe let me know if you want to stick with that, but because I see rental coming up a lot and sales prices coming up a lot, so maybe I'd answer it by having the sales price category and this rental rates or rental experience category, kind of what you said.
I just wouldn't want to wash away completely equity or parity as its own conversation, since people do have lots of different experiences accessing the program for other reasons besides the fact that they're either going for rentals or ownership.
And one thing we'll do after this is we're going to take notes of everything in the category and keep each individual post-it as subtopics underneath each. So do you think it would work if we keep the equity pieces underneath the topic of both sales prices and one of the equity post-its underneath rental rates? Or do you think it needs to be in the category title? Okay. What do other people think?
Well, I would pose a question to the board. Should we have a sales and a rental? Because they're so different that a lot of these are just, I think most of them are under what would be rental categories, but like affordability and maintenance, that would apply to the sale units.
Right.
So in it's, you can make a change in the rental program more easily than you can something that's ongoing in the sales. So I'm just wondering if the board thinks we should break it into sales and rental, two different major categories.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think from the rental side, and I would just say, Peter, that the APCHA managed properties, the maximum rental rates in the APCHA managed properties and privately managed properties are both going to follow the same. They're both going to have the same categories. They're both going to have the same max rental rates. Assuming you've got one in category 2 that's APCHA managed and one that's private managed, those are going to be in the same. They're going to use the same measuring stick.
There's two that are not.
And then, obviously
Centennial and
the
Castle Ridge.
LIHTC
They have their
stuff,
own-
and
they have their own
I
management
understand that
there.
there's some that are separate, but for the vast majority, they will be in the same. And then I think on the sales side, I think you've got, as John mentioned, you've got the ongoing maintenance, which is certainly I think a consideration in the sales. In the sales category, I think you've got, we've seen there's category 4 units that are priced at the same prices as a new category 2, and I think that's kind of what we're trying to look at on the sales side.
So I've got a question here. So as I'm looking at these, particularly, so I'm looking at the parity and equity question, is that part of the category discussion? Is that a quality of that discussion? So, for example, we want to talk about how the categories are distributed and are they fair because we want equity? Or is there a separate, so when we bring you back a conversation, are we bringing you back a category conversation? So on here, is that really a category conversation, or is there a separate equity conversation that is separate and distinct?
I would want other portions that have nothing to do with price involved in an equity conversation. Who has access to applying to these things? What is it costing them to do so? How is the information being spread? You know, it's a little broader maybe than affordability, but I think it could play into it. And so I think there's other items involved in equity that I want discussed as part of this program. If all these mini categories that we're discussing end up being under sales and then under rental as we go about this conversation, if we want to break it up, I think that then those can be part of that equity should be part of our category conversation no matter what. I just don't want to miss other ways that people are accessing or being like what's being calculated, and are we making sure that we are applying the right things to the right cultural and demographic applicants.
Great, that's helpful. Does that work for other folks?
Peter?
Yeah, I would just say related to affordability, I think, I don't know if you want to tie this in, maybe it's a totally separate topic, but housing security is very different between the two, and I'm a proponent of figuring out how people can have the same or close to the same level of housing security being in rental housing, so that they don't feel this pressure that they're gonna have to leave the community unless they win the lottery. And so that's, I don't know if that ties to affordability or not, but yeah, housing security parity between ownership and rental. And just to Ward's point, you know, maybe just as an idea, spitballing, like maybe when you get into rental housing, just like ownership, your category is fixed. So that when you requalify every 2 years, your affidavit is just whether you're working 1,500 hours and, you know, living in your unit 9 months a year, and regardless of the category you're in, it doesn't readjust the same way it does, and it doesn't readjust in ownership.
So Peter, I'm going to take that as another vote for having a separate conversation on equity. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you've talked about could fall under that.
Yeah, so we've mentioned now a few different ideas for topics. Like I've heard, it sounds like there's going to be an equity category, maybe a sales price category, and then more of a rental rates category. Do I have that right? Or did we have different titles for those categories, or need to be split up in a different way?
Well, for me,
Go ahead.
For me, I think that equity ties to a percentage of your income, and it doesn't directly relate to what category you're in other than what the price of the rent is. So as a measure of equity, it would be a percentage of your income. And how the categories are split up is another issue. And they're I mean, like from the city, there are concerns with what category mixes are because there's mitigation at different categories and housing credits depending on different categories. So to have a category mix is important, but the equity part of it is try to across the board, regardless of what income level your household is at, that you're paying close to the same percentage of that income. To me, that's equity.
So is what I'm hearing is you don't think equity is its own category because it's built into all the other categories. Is that right?
No, I think that equity is a part of income. Yeah, maybe that is that to bifurcate categories in equity. Is that what you're suggesting?
Like, yeah, what I'm asking is, should we have our own equity category so we can discuss more about equity within the realm of affordability, or it isn't its own category because equity is going to come up in each and every one of these anyways, is what I was asking. And other people can weigh in on that too.
Kelly and then Peter.
Yeah, I just would offer that, there's policy things that we're going to talk about, and then there's like policy impacts that we have to, try and model out. And so to me, like equity kind of falls into the implementation consideration. I'm not sure it's its own bucket as much as it is a factor for when we consider how we implement policy changes.
Who's going to be the tiebreaker?
I agree with Kelly.
That's my thought too. I think a lot of the categories solve the equity issue.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, I agree with all those comments, and I just think if we're talking, as Ward said earlier, about specifically ownership and the burden, cost burden there seems to mostly be due to ongoing maintenance. I just think we need to be fair in thinking about how, what levers we're pulling and things we're doing on the rental side to make things palatable and help the renters in the same way. Even though their concern isn't ongoing maintenance, it's something different.
Okay. So if we all agree that equity is going to be built into all these discussions as a policy outcome, then as you were just saying, Peter, we can build out two separate categories that address the rental side versus the ownership side. So that way we're treating affordability different in each. So I'm going to read off some more of these Post-its. So that way we make sure we correctly categorize each. So we have max sales price and rental rates. So those will kind of be split up, but I can just keep them on one Post-it for now since we know that they both will have a home. We have sales price variations within categories. And we have how to treat neighboring units with large price differences and housing category pricing. So I am going to put at the top of here sales prices. But I want to make sure that housing category pricing and how to treat neighboring units with large price differences are correct in that category.
Well, so the housing category pricing was mine, and it dealt with, we've heard stories about a category 4 that hasn't sold for years, and it's priced well below a category 2, or whatever else. So to me, that was like, how do we improve that? I mean, is it a profit center to go help with reserve or with maintenance, assistance program where we raise that price to the category limit or levels, or do we reduce the category of that unit to a 2 to make it affordable for a lower, for example, for a lower level individual?
Yeah. And so I guess what I'm wondering there, so do you think that's correct being in sales prices? Like that's a subtopic to address within there? Or do you think appreciation, because that kind of relates to how units appreciate, if that would be a different category?
Because, it's a policy we would have to make to say, what are we going to do with that unit? We're going to let it sell back cheaper on a category 4, and that's a big win for that category 4 buyer, and they're paying 5% of their income for a mortgage payment, or do we raise the price and make it the term equitable for all category 4 units, owners?
What do others think?
I agree.
Yeah, I think this is like equity within the sales. Somebody that hasn't sold their unit, they're getting the short end of the stick because they're selling it for a lot lower. So some way to address
they're not, because they never, you put whatever you put in there. The sale isn't the problem. It's the purchase of it in the transaction. It's the purchase at a cheaper price. The sale, somebody who's in it for 30 years, let's say, they lived in it, they paid their mortgage, they probably don't have a mortgage today, and then they sell and they move on or whatever, but it's the buyer getting the benefit to buy it at a much cheaper price than what some of the other same units are selling for.
Kelly?
sorry, I forgot to put my hand up.
Okay.
Just in response to John's comment, the buyer is getting a great deal, but the seller is losing potential because of the delta between the two. So
But no, and they shouldn't, they're not losing anything because they agreed to a 3% appreciation or whatever it is for that unit. They put their 10% in or something for whatever their capital expenditures, the one time. And then, what's creating these prices is every time they turn, somebody gets 10% to then spend on it. They put it in, they get another 10% the next time. So you get those bigger price variations between the units. If it turns one time, that owner is getting what they bought in for.
This will be a robust conversation when it comes up, because I also don't think you can point blank say that the buyer is getting a good deal. There's a unit in Hunter Creek right now that I think 10 people have passed on. But I think if you haven't had a new owner in a condo, it doesn't necessarily mean it's been taken care of or updated.
That's a policy discussion where APCHA goes out and buys the unit, right? We buy it at the max sales price because that's kind of what it seems like we're stuck with. We fix it up and we put it back on the market at a new unit or refurbished unit, whatever you want to call it, at that category level, or and trying to recoup our money or make a little bit on it so that we can feed it back into the program.
Well, I think another policy, pivot on that could be that along with AMI and rental rates, there's regular updates to minimum sale price within a category. I think this is just a really, really big discussion to be had. And I do think all four of those things match in that category.
yeah, I definitely think we should have a more in-depth discussion on that in future times. So, yeah.
That's going to be
That's exactly what we'll do.
a robust conversation.
Yeah.
That'll be a robust
And so,
conversation.
just to help us prepare for that, I want to make sure that we're properly identifying the categories of those discussions. So based off what we just talked about, where does that leave us with if we're just having a sales price category, or if we have a different category that's more about,
I don't think category as much as price, like exactly what you titled it, sales price.
yeah.
Sorry, she meant grouping.
Okay.
So
Yes,
I
I
think you
didn't
have to
mean
use the
grouping.
word grouping.
That's a better idea, yeah.
I think, they're two different discussions because I think you have the category discussion about what's the appropriate min and max sales price for a category.
Right.
And then you have the separate discussion is what do you do with these properties that are priced very differently within the same category?
Yeah, and so how would you headline that grouping, the second one? Because we could change this one to like max sales price, so that way we know
Minimum and maximum sales price.
Yeah, and then the other one about more unit turnover and the disparity between how much a unit turns over and how that impacts price. How would you call that grouping?
I almost feel like that goes under maintenance, or like there's some category called quality. So because what you're getting for what you pay for is a huge part of affordability, right? So if you're paying more because it's flipped a lot, but that means every appliance in there is newer and like, I don't know, the HOA is better taken care of, or like.
Not necessarily.
Not
right?
necessarily. But there's got to be some ratio of product to price that we continually battle with kind of in that maintenance realm.
I don't see how you break them up because I think on the sales side, I think they're all related. I think it's what are the minimum maximums? How do you treat different properties? What if it is a low price category that has been completely redone? That's different than the situation where you've just got one that's priced very low. I think they're all, and maintenance ties into that. And I understand it's a big category, but I don't see how you break it out.
I actually think you're right, Carson, because I think this is actually, compared to some of the others, a very focused topic.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I said I think all four of those go under that.
All right. Well, if everyone agrees, then let's stick with that and put the last category down.
And Liz, to your point,
Or
we actually
grouping?
we have a post-it that actually specifically address how to treat neighboring units with large price
And
differential.
so that idea will not be lost. It will be written beneath there.
I think it would be a useful data point to see if the sales prices are always at the maximum. Because I think there's a feeling that there's such a demand and such a limited supply that sell units, and I could be totally wrong in this, but sell units always go for the maximum sale price. So if we had a study of that.
This is one where, you know, I can identify, I'm sure Liz can quickly, 18 different queries that Liz and Andrew could do to look in the database, the home track database, to determine, to bring you data on what does this look like, what does that look like, so then you can have a policy discussion.
Okay. And then the last grouping we had talked about was rental rates, which, does that seem like a proper way to describe that? Right now, I do have the 3 equity post-it notes underneath there, but because those are, I mean, because for example, this one says equity rental at % of income, so it does relate. So does that feel okay to keep those there? But we know, but maybe some of these we could move to a different one, like attempt % of income equity, and maybe the parity or quality of affordability across the whole program. Rental and ownership maybe would go more into category brackets. Whatever.
I think you're right
Peter?
on the ladder.
Yeah, Peter, if you wanna, if you agree or not.
Peter?
Yeah, so I liked Ward's idea a while ago about just, you know, rental rates being tied directly to income, and I'd love to just understand why that's not realistic. And I realize some of that has to do with the privately owned rental units kind of having a more predictable revenue stream. If it's tied to categories like set rates, but I think the spirit of that idea was to make the categories fair for everyone within them, from the bottom to the top. But I'd be curious to hear the argument for why that's just not realistic to tie rental rates directly to renters' income.
So Peter, I think just quickly, I mean, I think the primary concern there is that if you have a privately managed rental and they can get a higher rent if they rent to someone with higher income within a category, I think you would start to see the trend being towards people at the low end of the category being unable to acquire those properties.
Hey,
We also,
isn't that more of a discussion though for when we get into that discussion? I mean, we're getting in the weeds a little bit with that, aren't we?
Good point. Yes, and that is a discussion you can have as part of that.
it's also a physical item that's a limited supply. So if we want to talk about equity, then and every category should have equal access to bidding on units in our system. If the rental rate changes with how much you earn, we'll lose all Cat 1s over time. You know, like there just won't be equity. There won't be any bottom level units anymore. And so like if you come to town and you're making very little and no units recycled because people grew out of them essentially, then where are you going to find those units for those bottom earners?
I think per Allison and Carson's points, I think it will be a very short discussion.
I want to put in, is there any space for equity outside of how much we're spending and just like access within the affordability discussions?
Could you maybe expand on that? I mean,
Yeah, like how people, I don't know. So this is why I think I'd want to put it up. But like, is paying every time you bid a affordability blocker? Is there a world where it's category based how much you pay, or like as how you find out? So like getting access to the internet to find out that there are affordable units in your area, a blocker. Like what is keeping certain portions of our community away from accessing the units? Or, yeah, is there anything that's making it less affordable to do so?
Excuse
I
me.
just don't know the answer to that, like paying a tax person so that you have your documents to show. I don't know if there's blockers right now that are keeping people out of the system, just that barrier to entry.
Yeah, that was my question
Okay.
to you, is, are there barriers that exist for equal access to bidding? You mentioned internet. I think that's kind of ubiquitous. People, if you don't have a computer, you go to the library, but I understand that I always have said that
Yeah, but then you
broadband
pay,
internet should be
take a bus, and then, like, are we costing people just to be part of?
Yeah, I think that broadband internet is an essential utility, but that's a different discussion.
I'll leave.
And Allison, I think you have brought up an important point for this board, and I would put that in the items to send to Liz, because what we want to give back to you is a full list of everything you're interested in. No one who put up one of their top two said that particular version of equity on here, so I think that would fall to that third Post-it, and please email that one.
Okay.
We can add it to the list.
that's an
so
important
It's
one.
going to be accounted for.
Saying it right now if I forget to email you, okay?
I'll write it down.
Thank you.
Don't worry.
And Liz, before you are you planning to just check for understanding on that?
Yep, so
Great.
that's the plan.
Thank
So
you.
next we're gonna move into prioritization. And before we do that, I'm just gonna read off the 7 categories that we identified from the brainstorming exercise to make sure that we all understand the 7 categories and answer any questions before we move into priorities. So we have compliance, 2 category brackets, 3 maintenance affordability, 4 category unit distribution, 5 minimum and maximum sales prices, and then 6 rental rates, and 7 AMI metric. So are there any questions about those 7 categories? All right.
So I have one for you.
Yes.
So rental rates, you all saw the heat map in your packet that shows that the people in some of the lower APCHA categories are paying a higher percentage of their rent. Would you put that topic in of looking at, hey, are these correct? Is that rental rate or is that category bracket? I'm curious if grouping number 2 and grouping number 6, those topic areas, are those the same or different?
Is that that I remember seeing that chart quite a while ago? Is that something that's being updated in this study? That
We're not asking them to update it because the APCHA categories haven't changed. So that's going to, right, though all the rents move, they move in unison, so that chart's going to still be valid.
well, we know that the people living in those lower ones are we'll know how much they're earning, and so
That chart simply looks at what percent, if you fall in that AMI range of a category, what percent of your income are you spending on housing?
if you're in the very middle of it.
If you're,
On the extremes.
it's on the end. Yep.
My understanding was that rental rates, one thing that people wanted to discuss was if and when and how those change or you requalify for them, which is why I see that as a separate category than category bracket. So maybe it's called rental qualifications or something instead.
Sorry, this was not related to that one.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure when we come back, like, we know what we're bringing to you.
Yeah.
These all just blend in together.
They all do.
Yeah, because
And you cautioned us from putting too much into a bucket, I guess, too. So I'm trying to hear that from you. And I think there's people on the board who are asking, should renters get kicked out if they stop qualifying, essentially?
And is that what 6 is about?
Rental rates?
well, I think 6 and 2 intermix. And then what Peter brought up about, if you're a renter and you get an increase in pay, does that mean that you have to move out of your category and move up a category? So and this is, I mean, this is where we get into the weeds. Do you have a flex on the category mixes? I mean, you brought up the number of units that are in that category mix, but if somebody in a rental program changes their financial position, do they lose their housing?
Right now they do.
Well, we already have that. I mean, that's already
Yeah.
built into the regulations right now to allow,
A year.
it allows your income, right? You get the additional income,
You can go to 150% and you get a year.
right?
Yep. So should we put, and I appreciate that, Allison, should we put rental rates and category brackets together, or should those stay separate?
Kelly?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna ask if there's any way to drop the 7 items into the chat. With regards to this conversation, I think they should be separate.
Okay, I don't think we have
I
a
don't know if we
chat.
have a chat.
There's no chat. Maybe I could make another slide quick and just
Says-
type them up.
There's an option to do a whiteboard.
Can you see that, Kelly, with a new view from our fantastic GrassRoots TV tech team?
Maybe
I
we
can
turn that.
take a picture
Or
and
take a
send
picture
to
of it
Kelly.
and send it?
Yes, that would be helpful, because I couldn't write it down fast.
Matthew's
Yeah.
on it.
I
All right.
have John and Peter's.
Well, we could send
yeah,
it
you've
quick
got
to the people that
everybody's.
text me.
Yeah.
We are adapting. Okay.
Good.
And I might need to retake this if we change any of the categories too.
I think it's just so we can participate in
Did we
this
decide to
Yeah.
The
What
Marines say
category?
adapt and improvise or
keep them
something like
separate, or?
It sounds like keep it
Definitely.
separate, but I want to make sure I have
That was-
Kelly?
Sorry, I can't get to mute fast enough. Yes, I said to keep them separate, please.
Okay.
Fine.
Do other board members agree with that, or any other thoughts?
All right, we want to give, did you get can you send them a picture?
I just sent the picture
Oh, you
to
did?
everyone.
You're
Yeah,
so
the
on
3.
it.
Yeah. I'm a fast
Awesome.
texter. Okay.
Such a Gen Z.
All right.
Wow,
so
that was really fast.
I'm not.
Yeah.
So-
Still be doing it. No, not gonna happen.
I'll help you, Diane. Okay.
Nope, not actually possible.
So next we're gonna move into prioritization then. And so I have little dots, and those that are online, we're doing all the fun things. And those that are online can text me again, the 2 that you'd like to vote for, and then I'll put your dot on for you. Sorry you don't get, it's kind of fun to put your dot on the board, so sorry you're missing out, but like a little
Could
kid.
be more of a discussion. Well, I can dot first, but I just, I don't, like, if, I think the most important thing is probably category brackets, which we couldn't talk about until we knew if we want different ones for rental and ownership and what metric we want to use. So I guess my priority of what we talk about is like being tampered by the practicality of the order of operations of discussing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and. So here's the thing. We already know these are the most important things you want to talk about. What's good, what we want to know is where do we start? What will happen, you've all pointed this out at various points in this conversation. These are all related and these are all relevant to you. What we want to do is be able to, you want to be able to make policy changes that will have a positive impact on the APCHA community, on the community of APCHA and the whole Aspen and Pitkin County community. To do that, we need to focus. And so it's basically, where do we start?
Can you tell us where you can't start because we won't have the data yet?
I would say the data is going to inform. The reality is you've all been working without this data and been making policy changes. You will have substantive discussions, and in those discussions we may say, okay, before you make that change, do you want some more data?
Okay.
Carson had this conversation with me where he said, look, I think we can talk about this before we have all that rental rate data. And it's a great question, Allison. So if you would, and we are scheduled, we've got other folks on the agenda tonight, so we want to make sure they have, they have time. And as I said, this is just the start.
Everything's amendable. No moves, you're not. Sorry. You'll move it back.
Have a 2 and 1. Is that cheating?
I don't know, that's a good question for the moderator. Ranked choice voting. Yeah.
Those people, and then we stretch the categories out.
But there's nowhere for those upper end people to go because they can't buy.
But they're grandfathered in until they're dead.
Get text from everybody?
All but one.
Kelly, did you have something, or is that an old hand?
House people.
Brilliant.
The dots, they work.
Not speak.
That is truly impressive.
And I think just I'm waiting on one more person that's online, but you can keep thinking too, and we can add them afterwards. I mean, otherwise, just because of time, we definitely see top 2 emerging here, category brackets, and then minimum and maximum sales prices. And I can add when we get those votes. But this will leave us in a good place for where we want to start this discussion in May. And again, and just because of time, I think we should just move to the conclusion. So, what?
We're in time right now.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
I want to know the vote. What did everybody?
Oh, yeah, right. They
They
don't know.
Oh, you want to see how it looks?
It's a surprise.
I could secret. I
2 and
can-
5.
I
We'll
can.
tell you April 3rd.
Yeah, 2 and 5 are the ones with the most. But I can send a picture of the final chart too.
Category brackets.
To your computer and then share it.
Category
I'd just
brackets.
like to see the stratification of the vote from every,
Yeah.
where.
Why don't I send that?
John wants a recount.
I'm sending it.
No, you missed one of mine.
It's
So,
rigged.
and what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna write this all up so that way everyone's ideas are still captured and we keep all of these discussions ready to talk about in the future as the APCHA board.
And it's interesting because these 2 are distinct, truly. I mean, they have some distinctions. You could have around sales prices because it's strictly related to ownership, right? It's a much more focused topic. Obviously, you're going to have to talk with staff, but there's a possibility we may have you have both these conversations. Not at the same time, but we might bring you both of these topics in faster succession because they're so different.
Yeah, definitely. And along with that, we have note of for separate topics to housing security and access equity. So those are also accounted for. And so you can send Diana or myself via email any other additional bullet points or ideas that come to you after this meeting, and we'll add it to the future discussions list as well. But to start us off in May, when we have on the May 15th APCHA board meeting, we'll be prepared to have our affordability follow-up. Yeah. Anything to add?
Sorry, I didn't realize, I'm looking at Liz does an awesome outline, and so definitely send those to Liz, don't send them to me, because they'll get lost in my email. Also, right, we are coming back on May 15th. You may see different people at the table, but that conversation will come back. Importantly, staff, in particular, Bethany's got some policy discussions that tangentially relate to affordability that she will be bringing back in the near future. So this doesn't preclude staff from bringing you discrete topics that are wow, we're seeing this happen right now in the portfolio, so we think this is really important for the board to address. Those things will still happen interspersed with this work. And thank you all. We really appreciate you We know it was a little bit unusual of a board meeting, and we appreciate you trusting us and allowing us to do this.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, and thank you, Ward, for suffering through the dots.
Oh. Thanks. This is going to be it's going to be a robust conversation, but I think it's important work, and you know, I'm grateful that it's a challenging topic. I mean, it's going to have some big impacts, and I'm glad the board is willing to take it on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, ladies.
Okay.
Good luck, Diane.
All right. Next, we'll move to communications update with Carolyn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Hi, Carolyn Zachariason, co-manager of the Communications Department of the City of Aspen. I'm going to share my screen.
Kelly.
Hi, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry to, Caroline, I have to jump off to do an end of season thing with my daughter. And I know you'll preserve quorum even if I leave. And so
We
I'm
won't
very
go.
sorry to miss the
No.
rest of the meeting, but I do have to go. Caroline, I'll give you a call.
We will not have a quorum.
Sure.
Yeah, we-
can talk offline.
Hold on. So we hold on.
You asked for it, Kelly.
So we do not have a quorum if there's no one from the county, correct, Tom?
That's true. We opened the meeting with her, and we don't have another vote,
Well, but you lose the quorum, you can lose your quorum, I mean.
so we can't adjourn ever, and we have to just stay here. That's the last thing we're voting.
Of course, the other side of this is, I'm thinking out loud, it's not an action item, it's just for information. So, you can have meetings of the board without a quorum, right? Under open meetings law, if you have 3 members meeting to discuss business, you don't have to have a quorum, it requires notice. And this meeting's been noticed, so I think you can go ahead and have the discussion with the understanding that it's gonna be open and that there's no action associated with it.
Would we be able to vote to go into executive session or vote to adjourn
No.
without a county commissioner?
That's helpful to know. So what I'll do, I'll hang on. I'm not going to be able to participate for about the next 15 minutes, but I will vote to go into exec.
Can you?
Oh,
can
that, if
get
you comes
Clancy
back,
on?
yeah, if
Okay.
Kelly comes back in 15 minutes, that's
Okay,
fine.
Kelly, I'll do you want me to just text you?
Please.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. I'm sorry again. Thank you for your flexibility.
Thanks.
Okay.
Karen, I think you need to, let me be a co-host so I can share my screen.
There you go.
Okay. You see that, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so this is a communications update from the City of Aspen Communications Department. And we'll go right into our the objectives of the communication plan that I started working on in the fall of 2023. And these are the objectives: to increase awareness and educate the public on APCHA's role in the affordable housing arena, increase community awareness of APCHA's programs and successes, educate the community on how to access APCHA's services, going back up, and build trust and transparency with the community. To meet these objectives, the city's communications department has focused on a handful of tactics and channels to achieve our goals, which I think is proven to be successful thus far. We'll start with social media. This was some channels and tactics that we started with in August and September. And APCHA's social media is gaining traction and followers. We've increased the frequency of hyper-local focused social media posts on Facebook and Twitter. And as a result of that, we've seen some growth in the engagement on APCHA's Facebook page and also in the reach of Facebook page for APCHA. People are reaching out, we're reaching more people, and they're engaging. And I think that's partly due to, we're posting more relevant content, lottery winners regularly, initiatives and programs like the audit program that was launched last summer and the capital reserve study. We're regularly posting Carson's column, that another one will appear tomorrow in the Daily News. Twitter hasn't proven as effective. There's a small amount of followers, and I think that's just chalked up to not a lot of people are using Twitter anymore. And I think to attract more followers and a younger audience, I think we should create a APCHA Instagram account. Also in the future, we plan to create more video content to highlight human-centered storytelling and share more personal stories of the APCHA staff and if board members, if they're willing to just, I think, show that they're accessible and they're trustworthy and it can explain the why behind some decisions and policies. So that's it for the social media portion of the communications plan. Media relations, since we began this comms plan last fall, we've improved and had consistent media relations leading to more coverage with media partners. We've had increased frequency of press releases highlighting APCHA initiatives and programs. There's been the establishment of a monthly column representing the APCHA board in the Daily News. I meet with reporters from both papers regularly to discuss APCHA policies and programs in an effort to provide a big picture context. I do regularly meet with the editors too, make sure that they're following along and know what's happening at the board level and administratively. And we'll continue to do this. We're in a pretty good groove right now, momentum-wise. So you'll see, I think you'll keep noticing headlines covering APCHA and the work that you guys are doing. Moving on to another tactic that we've employed is the use of newsletters. We're getting the word out through these. We're getting the word out of APCHA initiatives through these channels. So the community development newsletter has about 1,000 subscribers, and that is distributed through the city every other week on Fridays to the development community, architects, and others who are interested in the built environment. APCHA, we've used that newsletter in the past, and we've also used it for ACRA's sponsored email blast, which goes to a list of businesses for targeted messaging. We used it in August to get the word out about available Category 5 units at Burlingame 3. And then, of course, we've got the APCHA newsletter that went out earlier this year and is going to be going out again in April with what Matthew mentioned earlier, with the highlight and the focus being on the capital reserve study. Looking forward to the rest of the year, we have planned some coffee meet and greets at APCHA this spring, and that will also be with Matthew and the staff, but also when a new outreach coordinator is hired, and then when the Denver firm is up here for the capital reserve study. I think there will be people interested in meeting those individuals. I think that Q2 we can see a new Instagram account, and I think we can populate the APCHA website with the newsletters and other local content. And then building off of that, we can put some of those, human-centered storytelling and Q&As and myth busting on the website as well. And I do think Matthew may have a different idea on this, but I do think we should increase the APCHA newsletter frequency. There's 7,000 subscribers, so that's a big audience that we can reach. We're going to do some more paid advertising in the newspapers to highlight the programs and the initiatives that APCHA is doing and the successes. We have some money now for that was freed up with not having the contract with Slate anymore. And then we're going to bring back the HOA expert to have a session with her. I think that was pretty well attended in the past, so we want to get that out there. And then in Q4, we'll look at a website redesign. We'll have to see how Andrew and the staff get through the accessibility project that's due and wrapped up by July. And the communications department is working on a community engagement framework so that the city and its departments can operate from that and have more increased presence in the community. So I'm not sure if that's roundtable discussions yet, or town halls, open houses, focus groups, depending on what APCHA's needs are and what messaging you want to get out. So that's kind of the highlights of what I think the communications plan from the communications department in the city can do for APCHA. So as you know, it's a high level, and I know Kelly had asked for this, so I wanted to make sure we could get it to her and the board in a timely fashion. So if you guys have any questions or comments, I'm open to hearing them. If you want to go back to a slide, let me know.
Will you go back to the first slide of our objectives, please?
Sure.
Do you feel like any of these are being less addressed than others? I'm trying to make sure all those tactics kind of connect. I can draw and connect the dots. I think the things that we hear about on the board level the most is based as maybe that first bullet point, but your face is actually in the way and I can't read it all. I think the separate role of, the county, the city, the office of APCHA and the APCHA board, I think is one of the most confusing elements of this program. And so I'm guessing that's coming up in Carson's columns, maybe some of your local targeted social. I guess I just want to make sure that each of these are getting their fair due, and that one just comes up frequently. And I guess to that point, I didn't understand if the board is how the board's being incorporated in some of the tactics. Are we part of the meet and greets? Is the board kind of not part of any of the communication? And to that extent, I think make very clear who is running the Instagram. Like the more outlets you have, make sure people who communicate in some of that two-way social know who they're talking to or kind of who's responsible for what. Or I can foresee some interesting comments on some of your posts. And if you do go photo heavy on a social platform like Instagram, we have had that request that when units go for sale, we get some pictures up. I think that does help accessibility. I think that was a great outcome of COVID for people who didn't have Wednesday afternoons to drive around the valley. And I wonder if that could be one of the type of things that's part of our photo heavy communications, is bringing that back.
We do post photos whenever possible.
Which is not frequent, huh?
It's very frequent,
Okay.
but sometimes the seller doesn't give them to us, or they would actually have a detrimental effect, in which case we do not post them.
And we are not taking them, we're relying on them.
Yeah.
But we are walking through the unit and looking
Yeah.
at it. So we could take them.
We can look at that.
You think less people would bid if they saw the state of the unit?
Some of them.
Do you think that is a fair thing to put online then? Like, so people know what they're getting themselves into?
That would be one way to look at it, but we were trying. That isn't what we were looking for. Yeah,
I mean-
we can talk about that.
Okay, I mean, that's the experience when you go visit it for sure, right? Like, that is why we do the open house. And there's times when you go to an open house and you realize this is not the thing for me. Why not let everyone know that, even if they couldn't make it to the open house? But I'm sure there's lots of other considerations. And, if things end up permanently on the internet in photo form, maybe that's embarrassing for all. So that's my takeaway. Thanks so much for working on this, Carolyn.
You got it. Thanks for the feedback.
How do we gauge the last bullet point?
I think it's over time. I don't think there's a silver bullet to that. I think the more interaction the board has and staff has with people, they feel connected to the agency, that people have that. And I think with myth busting on the website, with information out there in like tomorrow's column from Carson, we talk about compliance. That's a big one. And
Right. But Ward, you're right. We don't have polling data going back 20 years saying, favorable impressions of APCHA, nor do I think we will get them. But we are specifically targeting some of the myths and the ideas that we feel that need to be addressed. And I think the most prominent one of them, just since January, has been the idea that everybody's cheating. And now we have direct data saying, no, they're not. And we can say, hey, no, we do have data on compliance, and this is it. And you guys will get a full briefing on that when we've done about a year of it. But just the stories we've already had in the paper, that's a great example of directly addressing a problem and increasing trust and transparency in the community.
I think that the trust, I think a lot of the lack of trust, I think it comes more from, to Allison's point earlier about just the complexity of
Right.
how everything interacts. And it's complicated. And I think when people see something that they don't understand, and then they don't have the full transparency to see the audits and to see the compliance cases, I think that causes people just to sort of inherently not trust because they just don't understand it. And so I think that, like I said, the transparency thing, the compliance article that's coming tomorrow, it talks about the compliance cases that we've opened, how many of those were found to be in compliance, and then touches on sort of why, and then I highlight just the ability. Sometimes we have the audits, but sometimes we do have to rely on the community to make those reports, and then but I then go through the ability to make an anonymous complaint and to track it online. I think as we kind of just continue to get more transparency and trying to give the public the ability to kind of see behind the curtain and understand what's going on, I think the trust will come. I don't know how you measure it.
Well,
I would suggest that another part of us regaining trust has been the loss of one of our biggest detractors, right? There was regular columns being written with statements that were incorrect or were out and out, had supposed facts that weren't facts. And so I think that's also a huge part of the direction we're headed now, which is in a positive direction, is being able to debunk certain things that were being said and being able to back that up with facts.
Ward, I'm glad you asked that because I actually did mean, and maybe this is a Diane, I don't know where the citizen survey comes from, but I do think we ask questions about, like, are you satisfied with essentially, city services, police, and like, how do you feel safety? Do you feel like your utilities are coming okay? Is there room for, have we ever asked questions like, do you do you have faith in APCHA? But we wouldn't ask it that way because we don't want to know the answer.
Do you know, Carolyn?
No, I don't think APCHA has specifically, but I think that's a really good idea.
We used to be part of the city survey.
Yeah, we can check in. Carolyn and I can check in with the folks who are running that because this is a year for the survey and your timing's good. So I think it may still be possible.
And of course, this year would be baseline, but I love the question of how are we measuring, because then that's the next thing we get to boast about, right? Like, so.
Yeah, and as you said, it's tricky to figure out what the question is. Thanks.
I'll mull it.
Anything else for Carolyn? I would just say, Carolyn, thank you for the work you're doing. I think you're doing a great job, and I think this is work that's long overdue.
Thanks, Carson.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, let me text Kelly.
Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Grab the markers.
I was really hoping to steal it. I looked at it, I was like, ooh, I wonder if I need to give this back.
But they love the markers.
Just so satisfying. Thank you.
One more sniff.
So we're just waiting on Kelly to jump back on so that we can go into executive session. After the executive session, there are no more items on the agenda, and we will adjourn promptly after the executive session. So for anyone who is not going to be in the executive session, you can feel free to drop now, or you can wait until Karen kicks you out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kelly said she'll be 2 minutes.
Glad you mentioned that survey. I remember 2 years ago, I was like, oh, are we part of this?
Right.
You know, they kind of forgot about.
And if we have been before, we can use those same questions and
Yeah.
maybe see a change. But
I've kind of forgot.
even satisfied might be like a neutral way to ask, because everyone who got a house is going to be like,
How would you rate APCHA's overall management?
or its impact on the community, positive or negative. Like, everyone's going to say positive.
I mean,
I'm not getting involved in
I've
this.
talked to a lot of
I
people.
want to know the results.
I mean, I would say generally the feedback I get is positive. I mean,
I don't think anyone thinks, well, besides maybe one person you mentioned, that the program shouldn't exist, right? Like,
no, but I mean, I mean, even with some of that, I mean.
Carson, your mic's off. Thanks.
well, it's not.
Well, we're just kind of.
I know, that's what I do.
I think in general, people,
Just to let you know, for the longest time, we did our own surveys. It was one of our goals and outcome measures. For years, we did it. We did a tenant survey every single year, asked them about property management, asked them about maintenance. We were also incorporated into the city survey on a yearly basis, because they had all the departments. How are the police doing? How is APCHA doing? So we were part of the community survey as well. So if they took us out of that survey, I don't know why,
We'll
because
pull
we
up on
were part of that for years. Yeah.
And we should look at some of those numbers that we have.
Yeah.
Does she then have to listen to the whole thing, or?
Does she have to get out, or does she have to jump back in? She has to come back in, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Allison. Once we go into executive session, can she leave and we can still be briefed? I don't know. We lose a quorum if she's not there, but there are no decisions being made in exec.
Then you can't come out of exec session or in the meeting.
Don't leave, Kelly.
No. Make sure you leave Ward in there.
I'll leave the board.
Oh, I wonder if we're gonna have,
Kelly's on the phone.
we usually have issues with them when we go into exec session
I would love to just put Kelly on.
with them. Well, we have John too.
Yeah, we can do
Peter.
Yeah,
Oh,
we have both.
Who's 319 and 219?
That's Kelly.
Okay, perfect.
She
She's
connecting?
in. Kelly's in.
She's in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
Okay, we have a quorum. Would anyone like to make a motion to go into executive session?
Do you want to introduce it, Tom, or?
Pardon me?
Do you want to introduce?
Well, you got to vote
No,
first
somebody,
to
somebody
go
has
in.
to read what's
Yeah,
on
you
the
can just
agenda.
read what's on the agenda, and that would be sufficient.
Whoever wants to make the motion.
I move that we go into executive session for the conference with APCHA, attorney for the purposes of receiving legal advice under C.R.S. section 246402 4B regarding case number 2022 CV 30094, Cameron McIntyre and Patricia Redfield-McIntyre versus Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority.
I'll second.
Okay, motion from Ward and a second from John Ward. And it's a roll call vote.
Okay. John Ward,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes, and I'm gonna join on Zoom when you get into exec.
okay. Carson,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes?
well, Allison has stepped out, but we have a,
Okay, are we going, is there anyone, Tom, that we need to invite into executive session? No. So no one we need to invite in?
Only board members and staff is allowed to be present, since there's nothing pending before the board.
And this
on
does not need to be recorded because,
Pardon?
this does not need to be recorded?
It does not need to be recorded under the open meetings law, because it's strictly for attorney-client privilege communication.
Okay, we're gonna
Yeah.
take just a couple minutes here, clear the room, and stop GrassRoots. And as I said, there will be no further agenda items after the executive session.